All right. Thank you for joining us, everybody. This is the Talking Pools podcast. I am Andrea Nanini, and today I have a special guest. Um, I have Joe Trusty with me. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Andrea. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It was really hot today, so I'm glad to be in the air conditioning.
Yeah, it's been a scorcher by me in California too.
Oh, really? I- I'm just so like blind to everybody else's weather just because it's so exhausting to be so hot all the time.
Yeah, we had like a good dozen days where it was just over 100 degrees every day.
Yeah, I have some of my pools are one of my commercial pools is I looked at it today, it was 96 degrees and the heater's not even like it's set to 86, so it's heater's not running.
I haven't been using my pool too much this summer. The water's just been so hot. I'm trying to figure out ways to cool the water in my pool, but I don't think I'm the only one. I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal recently. Some guy at Coachella Valley, I think, and he's been throwing 300-pound blocks of ice into his pool.
Mm.
I know that gets kind of costly, $20 a pop from your local ice manufacturer.
Oh wow. Well, I know Rudy and I talked about this in an episode like a while ago. I guess Ozzy Osbourne did that on an episode when they were still doing the show. So I don't know. I guess it would depend on how big the pool is and how much ice, but I don't feel like it would really make a huge difference. I don't know.
Nah,
That's a good-
I've been thinking about getting one of those pool chillers that I've been seeing everywhere.
I've seen those in Key West, actually. They have those are popular down there. And then where I am, the Tropical and then the Aquacal heaters or the heat pumps, they also have chiller versions.
Yeah,
So I have a couple of people that use their spas as cold plunges. So they just put it in spa mode and put it on the chiller instead of the heater,
yeah,
which
I feel
cost
like
me.
I'm floating around in hot soup right now if I get into that pool.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been causing me a lot of algae problems, just because these pools are so hot and they're not even like the dark surface pools either. This got like the blue pools are like 100 degrees too. It's crazy. So
Yep.
anyway, oh, I forgot to mention, Joe Trusty, you are basically Pool Magazine. You run Pool Magazine with your wife, Marianne. So shout out to you guys. Um, Forgot to mention that earlier. So anyway, um, so I wanted to talk about phosphates today. Yes, again, I think Rudy and I have talked about it a bunch of times, and everybody talks about it. But I've seen so many like new people. Well, I've had people contact me, people that are new to the industry. I've had a lot of questions, and I've seen a lot of questions in the groups. Just you know, phosphates. How do I get rid of them? I've had people saying that they've had to do 2 to 3 treatments in like 1 week at one pool. And so I just kind of want to go through the basics of it again, just for anybody that's listening, like I said, that's new, or maybe you've been hearing one thing for a really long time. Maybe you'll learn something new. Maybe you'll hear something different. I don't know. Joe, maybe you have a different perspective on it than I do. So I guess we'll
Well,
see
yeah,
how it goes.
it goes back to what we were just talking about. I mean, the hot weather kicks in, and then all of a sudden you have an increase in phosphates in your pool. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and also too with, ooh, sorry, with if you have phosphates in the water at all, the heat, the temperature is going to just make things 100 times worse. So,
Yeah, it is invasive for sure.
yeah, so, and the other thing too is I just want to kind of like address because I've seen a lot of people, they're the people that think that phosphate remover or testing for phosphates, it's all quote snake oil or like a waste of money, or you get those guys that are like, oh, I've been doing pools for 100 years, and then 1923 we didn't even check for phosphates. I know it wasn't 1923, I'm just being exaggerating, but you know back to one of mine and Rudy's previous episodes about this, they weren't adding phosphates to the city water, the municipalities. They weren't adding phosphates to the water 50 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever. So that's why you didn't deal with it back then, and that's why we're dealing with it now. So, sorry. Do you know what phosphates actually are? Do you know what it
Yeah, I
is?
got a good understanding. I mean, basically, it's debris, right? That comes off from like sweat, oil in the pool, organic matter, stuff like that creates phosphates, right?
Yeah, so I just looked it up on Google to define phosphate. So it's a salt of phosphoric acid. So it's basically a type of acid or whatever that gets into the water from, like you said, all kinds of different places, sources. Yeah, so like you said, plant debris, dirt, fertilizers, all that stuff, dead skin. Um, those are like the most common thing that everybody kind of associates with the cause of phosphates. But what what I wanted to point out is that if you are using stain removers, if you're doing like a metal treatment, those have phosphates in them. Um, so like for startups, for example, I saw somebody say that they were asking if they should do a phosphate treatment during a startup because they had super high phosphates. Well, they likely added a lot of metal sequestrants in the startup process. So that probably added a lot of phosphates in addition to the city water. In my area, excuse me, in my area, some places, some neighborhoods, it's coming out of the tap at 1,500 parts per billion.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you're adding to that. Well, Florida's no. Like, I think we have a phosphate mine. I think Rudy said something about that. I had no idea until he told me. I was like, I didn't know we mined for that. But anyway, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
know. Their recommendation is to keep your phosphates like at their under 500 parts per billion. So if it's coming
yeah,
out of the tap, 1,500, yeah,
yeah. Then we're pretty. We're like we're starting from behind, right? So
yeah.
um, yeah, 1,500 in some neighborhoods where I am. So that's why I always check your source water, your fill water. Always test that, which I'll get into testing later. That's another thing that's been driving me nuts that I've been seeing people talk about. So also certain brands of salt contain phosphates. So if you have a salt pool and you're like, why is my salt pool so much higher in phosphates than my normal pool? It's probably because the salt. Um, if it says
Right.
stain fighter, if it says like anything about stain fighting or inhibitors, anything like that on the bag, I believe aqua salt. I feel like it doesn't anymore, but I know that it used to say that on the bag. But yeah, so that will add phosphates. If you have birds or dogs, that seems to drive up those levels. And then one thing too that I kind of just read as I was like reading into some of these articles, which you mentioned Dorenda. So their article is really, really great. I recommend everybody go read that. And then also there is an article by Neil Lowry everyone should
Yeah.
look up.
Join the Council for the Model Aquatic Health Code, aka CMAC. CMAC is a member-driven organization that keeps the Model Aquatic Health Code sustainable, current, and complete. Your expertise is needed. Learn more at cmac.org. That's cmahc.org.
And then also there is an article by Neil Lowry everyone should look up. That was a really interesting read as well. And most of my information that I'm talking about right now came from a lot of those sources. And anyway, so one of the things that I learned while reading those two things is that if you get algae in the pool, algae eats phosphates, right? So it can actually it will digest and then it can store those phosphates or like contain the phosphates. So if you get algae in the pool, that contains phosphates that can actually be another source of phosphates, which is something I didn't realize until just now. So yeah, it's basically it's just a cycle. So then when you kill that algae, it releases those phosphates, and then now you have a higher level, which is part of what I wanted to get into later on about actually testing for phosphates and why you should kill the algae first, get rid of all the algae first, then test for phosphates, because you could actually have a lower level if you have, or you know what I mean? Like if you have algae present, you could actually be getting a lower result on in your test than what is actually there. You could have some actually a
I
higher
read the
level.
same
I don't
exact,
know why that was so hard for me to explain.
yeah, I read the same exact thing. It gives you like a false positive.
Right, that's what I was trying to look for, yes. So yes, so that algae can also bring in more phosphates. Um, so yeah, so that was the main sources for phosphates, where they come from and why you would get them. Laundry detergents kind of don't really have them anymore, I don't think. Um, and also, I know it says fertilizers, but I did want to mention those also don't really use phosphates anymore in certain applications. But
Mhm.
anyway, there's
Right.
that. So um, the other thing too, so now I wanted to get into testing. And one of the things that's been driving me nuts is I've been seeing people say that they don't actually test for the phosphates. And what they'll do is pour a little bit of phosphate remover into the
Hmm.
water. And then if they get a cloud, then that means they have phosphates.
Yeah, I've seen.
And
Right.
go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. I've seen similar methods for sure.
Yeah, so it's wild to me, and I made this comment on Facebook. Like it's so wild because like I get it, yeah, phosphate, and I think I want to correct myself too on some comments that I've made, because I've said that the chemical doesn't, it's not necessarily reacting to the phosphates is why it gets cloudy. It's reacting also to carbonates in the water. So if you have calcium present, which we all do, if you have stabilizer, cyanuric acid, if you have that in the
Mhm.
water, which we all do, we add sodium bicarb, right, to raise the alkalinity. So there's that to an extent. So, which also, so yeah, so those things, it's also reacting to that as well as phosphates. So I don't agree. I don't agree with the method of just pouring it in to see if it clouds and then you add it, because why, like, how are you going to know how much to dose? Like, how are you going to know how much to add? How are you going to know how much you're bringing it down? So, like, if you're not testing, say you have 1500, let's say straight out the tap, one of my pools, and I only add like a bottle or half a bottle or whatever, I could have a much higher level of phosphates, and I'm not treating that level. So I'm just kind of fighting a losing battle. So that's my opinion. I know there's certain people that recommend it, and that's how they do their pools, and that's fine. But that is my question, is like, how are you going to know exactly how much to remove, how much you need to remove, the dosing, what you're dealing with, and do you actually have phosphates? Because I've tested zero phosphates with the kit and dumped in the phosphate remover
Hmm.
anyway and still had a cloudy reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because most phosphate removers are kind of made to be like sediment accumulation. It's almost like a flocculant in that way. So it's supposed to produce some kind of
Hmm.
reaction, right? So I mean, I think pool pros are looking for that reaction as a telltale sign, and if they see that, then it's a good indication. But I'm always a big advocate for go to the test kit first. A good test kit like a Taylor
Yeah,
K. It's yeah, it's a
2000s.
cheap test kit, and it's going to give you pretty dependable results. I mean, I would always, avoid using a phosphate remover if your pool is green. You're starting with a green pool with algae. You want to get that done first. I mean, otherwise you're
Right,
starting from a hole, like we said before. I mean, you're not going to get an accurate reading.
right. And also too, I mean, you're gonna just make a bigger mess of the pool too. I feel like getting one thing taken care of, get the algae out first, then test the phosphates once that's all gone, um, and then treat for phosphates if you need to do a whole ass treatment, as I like to say. So, there's lots of different test kits out there, different brands. Natural Chemistry will send you a free test kit if you send them a receipt that you purchase their product. Um, Aquacheck, there's lots of different test kits. But also, one thing I wanted to point out too is that there are low range and there's high
Hmm.
range test kits. So, like I said earlier about making sure that you know the number to so that you can dose it. Same thing like with the Taylor kits, they only test pH up to like 8.2, so you wouldn't really know if you had a level higher than that. Same thing if you had gotten the low range test kit, it only goes up to
Hmm.
1500 and you could have like 3500. So just make sure I would just recommend going with the high range because they go from 0 to the higher number. Um, and then, like I said, always test the source water.
Absolutely. Well, what's your go-to for phosphate removers, Andrea?
Well, right now, since I am working for somebody, I use what they provide me with, which is low chlor brand. So I use the low phos max. They have one that has enzymes in it. Oh, that's what I wanted to say too. Enzymes and phosphate remover go like beautifully together, like a caprese salad, Everything goes together and works and and works together. So make sure that you're using enzymes when you're doing a phosphate remover. It will help clear it up. It will help with anything that's, any dead algae, anything. Enzymes are great. I just love them. So yeah, wanted to recommend that. But yeah, back to your question. Low Fos Max. I have used other brands. I've used the Natural Chemistry. I'm a big fan of that one. I'm also a big fan of the Sea Clear
Yeah.
brand, the commercial one. Um, that one that treats high levels, and that's actually meant obviously for commercial. I did use that in one of my big pools that I used to do, and it was like a 200 or it was 198,000 gallons. So I used a whole bunch of that
Yeah.
and it worked out
I've
pretty
used
well.
the
So,
Orenda PR 10,000. I mean, it's a great product.
yeah, that's a lot of people's favorites. I have not had the chance to use the phosphate remover, but I have used their enzymes. I don't know their their model numbers. I apologize. CV probably something, but I did use the enzymes and I liked it. So, um, I don't know. Is there? I found out earlier, like I mentioned, that Jax did make one, but I don't think that they have it anymore. So, um, yeah, I don't know if there's other brands out there. Let us know. I don't think I've told anybody the email yet. So talkingpools@gmail.com. Um, and I don't know. I think. Oh, have you ever used or heard of anybody using a filter to put on the end of the hose, like to control, like to filter it from the source water?
No, not so much a filter for the source water. I mean, I've heard of guys doing like kind of like osmosis systems to handle the water when it comes out, and it's high in certain minerals or certain compounds to start with. But as far as like putting a filter or some kind of gadget at the source water level, no, not really.
No. I saw somebody asking about it, and somebody recommended a RV filter. Like, I guess you can get them from Home Depot. I don't know how that would work. I've never tried it or. or heard of that before, but it was something that I saw, so I didn't know if that was just, if it was something that I just didn't know about that other people do. So,
Yeah, I know there's
um,
phosphates in the city water supply to like protect the pipes and stuff like that. But I mean, to come
right.
out at at the levels that you're saying, I mean, yeah, it sounds like a problem from jump. I mean, how do you solve that when
hmm
the water supply contains that much phosphate to begin with?
So, I'm glad you asked. um, I basically only worry about it when it's a problem. So, if I'm having an issue where this algae won't go away, which I've been dealing with, or if I have just the pool won't hold chlorine for any reason, um, that's when I'll start to get into the. As well, I'll get my phosphate test kit out, and then I'll check. Um, this one pool I've had this week, though, it was green, green. I couldn't get the algae to go away. Would not hold chlorine. I would come back like 2 days later. I'd add 5 gallons of chlorine, 7.5 gallons of chlorine. I'd come back a couple of days later, it'd be zero. And it had stabilized like 60 with the cyanuric acid was 60. So it should be holding chlorine, zero phosphates. Anyway, I won't get into that. But what I do for a normal pool is, like I said earlier, kill all the algae, get all that taken care of, test the phosphates. I will add a small amount at a time because I am not a fan of having to come back, and clean the filter and vacuum to waste and do all
Oh, it
that stuff.
sucks. Yeah.
I don't really, I don't have time for that. I really don't. I do like, 18 pools a day. I don't have time to come back the next day to another one to stand there in 100 degrees, vacuuming, blah, 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 whatever, doing it. So I just add a small amount. The algae's gone. I put in a ton of liquid chlorine. We don't really use cal hypo here. I will use granular trichlor as well in some cases, and sometimes I'll use both because trichlor is like a nice little boost. As long as the current stabilizer cyanuric acid level in the pool allows for it. I don't want people screaming at me. I don't. I'm not going to drive up the cyanuric acid by adding the stabilizer or the trichlor. Anyway, low pH, high chlorine, and that should be enough to keep the algae from blooming when you do have stupid high phosphates.
I've been fortunate this year. No
The
algae
only,
blooms.
huh?
Phosphates aren't out of whack. I mean, I've had the same ball of Arenda in my pool shed for like the last 3 seasons. God bless. But watch, now I'll go and test my water and my phosphates. Yeah.
Well, if they're not bothering anybody, just leave them there, is what I say. But yeah, if it's causing a problem, I mean, the only other thing you can do is to either, do the whole treatment, remove the phosphates, like you said, bring in the osmosis water, right? The reverse osmosis,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think of
or
people putting in systems in place when they have bad source water to start from. Because it kind of creates
yeah,
completely neutral water and it's like a blank slate that you can kind of like equalize.
it's not something that I haven't like ever seen it before. Not say it's I'm not saying it's like not common or whatever. It's just not something I've encountered. Doesn't it have like usually has a low pH, the
It's got
water, or is that
like
am I
no
confusing that?
pH. It's like completely, yeah,
Okay.
completely.
Oh, you said neutral. Okay. Yeah. So and then also alum does remove phosphates. I don't know exactly the math on that, but that also requires a whole treatment of vacuuming to waste. Um, so I recommend just adding a couple ounces each week of phosphate remover. Try to limit, the stain removers. If you do need to do like metal sequestrants, make sure you get ones that are formulated without, I guess it's phosphonic acid. I don't know if I'm confusing the names, but yeah. you can get metal removers and stain removers without the phosphates. And yeah, just keep an eye on the source water. I guess that's my advice. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to recommend anything to anybody, it would be like use one of the top name brands. Don't use just like any junk that you find on the shelf, because a lot of pool stores I find carry products that just aren't really very good, for whatever reason. But I mean, me, I always like, the Orenda is great, Sea Clear is great, Natural
Mhm.
Chemistry is great. Like one of those names that we mentioned, stick with those. You'll be good to go.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll make sure that I link those articles that I mentioned for everybody. And Joe, I'll send it to you because, like I said, they're pretty interesting reads if you want to get deeper into the actual science and the different types of phosphates. Because there's like four different types of phosphates, and I think we only test for
Yeah, I'd like
one,
to read that Orenda
something
article
like that.
we were talking
Yeah,
about earlier. I haven't seen that one. I mean, I've seen one of the ones they
yeah.
wrote on it. It was like a one of the pillars of uh, was phosphate removal, and I did read that article. I don't know if it's the same article we're talking about.
I don't know. It didn't say any. I know what the four pillars are. It didn't say that. But I'll send it to you for sure. I'll message you it to you when we're done. So, and I'll make sure that Rudy gets it in the show notes for everybody else that is interested in reading it.
Great.
So I don't know. That's it. I'm done yammering.
Well, thanks so
So
much for
Joe, if you're ready to
thanks so much
go,
for having me, Andrea.
yeah, I appreciate you jumping on with me and keep an eye out for posts if you ever see. Not that I'd be like, oh, save me, but like if you're ever interested in talking again, like I'm kind of keeping this show open for people to jump in and talk about stuff with me and not necessarily, themselves. So I definitely appreciate the help,
Well,
the different
appreciate the
perspectives.
invitation, Andrea. Take care. You have a great day.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. You too. Bye bye.
Yeah, I'd like to read that Orenda article we were talking about earlier. I haven't seen that one. I mean, I've seen one of the ones they wrote on it. It was like a one of the pillars of was phosphate removal, and I did read that article. I don't know if it's the same article we're talking about. Great. Well, thanks so much for having me, Andrea. Sure. Well, appreciate the invitation, Andrea. Take care. You have a great day.